My wife's cheating almost destroyed us, but here's why I stayed. I always thought that marriage was about enduring the highs and lows together, as partners. When Lisa and I exchanged vows 8 years ago, I was certain that we'd tackle any challenge side by side. We were young and naive, sure, but there was something about our connection that made me believe we could survive anything. But I never expected the storm that was brewing, one that would shake the very foundation of our relationship. Our life was never glamorous. From the start, money was tight. We lived in a small, 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Detroit, scraping by on my job as a mechanic and Lisa's part-time gig at the local diner. Back then, it didn't seem to matter. We were in love, we had dreams, and that was enough to keep us going. But dreams don't pay the bills, and after a few years of living paycheck to paycheck, the cracks in our marriage started to show. I saw Lisa's frustration every day. She wanted more, a bigger house, better clothes, vacations. She watched her friends on social media living lives we couldn't afford, and it started to weigh on her. Why can't we have what they have? She'd ask me during late-night arguments. It was always the same fight. She wanted to know why I wasn't working harder, why I wasn't pushing for something better. But I was trying. God knows I was trying. When our daughter, Sophie, was born 3 years ago, everything changed. The weight of responsibility grew heavier. I took on extra shifts at the shop, sometimes working 60 to 70 hours a week. My hands were constantly covered in grease, my back aching from hours spent hunched over engines. I barely saw Lisa or Sophie anymore. I missed out on family dinners, bedtimes, and weekend outings, but I told myself it was worth it. I was doing it for them, for our future. I was determined to pull us out of the financial hole we were stuck in. Lisa, however, seemed to grow more distant with each passing day. She stopped asking about my work and barely acknowledged the sacrifices I was making. Her eyes were always glued to her phone, scrolling through Instagram or texting her friends. At first, I chalked it up to stress. I mean, we were both under a lot of pressure. But something about her behavior gnawed at me. There was a coldness in her voice that hadn't been there before, a wall I couldn't seem to break through no matter how hard I tried. I tried talking to her about it one night after Sophie had gone to bed. "Lisa, is everything okay?" I asked, sitting beside her on the couch. "You've been acting distant lately." She didn't look up from her phone. "I'm just tired, that's all." "Tired of what?" I pressed, feeling the tension between us grow. She sighed, finally setting her phone down and meeting my eyes. "Tired of this life, Tom. Tired of struggling, tired of never having enough. We're just stuck. And I don't know how much more I can take." Her words stung. I wanted to shout that I was doing everything I could, that I was killing myself to keep our heads above water. But instead, I swallowed my pride and nodded. "I know it's been hard. But things will get better, Lisa. I'm working on it. I'm doing this for us." "For us," she echoed, her voice flat. "Or for you? Because it feels like you're never here anymore." That conversation haunted me for weeks. I replayed it in my mind, wondering if I had somehow failed her, failed my family. But I couldn't stop working. We needed the money, and if I let up even a little, the bills would start piling up again. Then, one day, everything changed. It was a Saturday morning, and I was supposed to be at the shop for an emergency shift. But I'd woken up with a migraine that felt like a hammer was pounding against my skull. After a quick phone call to my boss, I decided to stay home and rest. I figured I'd surprise Lisa by making breakfast, something I hadn't done in months. As I shuffled into the kitchen, still half asleep, I noticed her phone buzzing on the counter. Lisa had left early that morning to take Sophie to the park, so I was alone in the house. I glanced at the phone, planning to ignore it, but then I saw the name flash across the screen, James. My heart skipped a beat. James? I didn't know anyone named James. Curiosity got the best of me, and before I could stop myself, I swiped the phone open to check the message. What I found made my stomach drop. The texts were from some guy I'd never heard of, and they weren't innocent. "I had a great time last night. Can't stop thinking about you. I wish I could be with you instead of him." I stared at the words, disbelief washing over me like a tidal wave. My hands shook as I scrolled through the conversation, reading message after message of flirtation, affection, and worst of all, plans. Plans they'd made to see each other while I was busting my ass to keep our family afloat. I felt sick. How long had this been going on? Was this just some fling, or was it more serious? The anger and hurt boiled inside me, and I didn't know what to do. I wanted to confront her, demand answers, scream at her for betraying me while I was trying to save us from the brink of financial collapse. But instead, I sat there in silence, the weight of her betrayal crashing down on me like a ton of bricks. Everything I had been working for, the long hours, the missed moments with my daughter, the sacrifices, I had done it all for her, for us. And she had thrown it all away for some guy named James. I spent the rest of that morning in a daze, replaying those messages in my head, over and over. James? Who the hell was James? How long had this been going on? The question swirled in my mind, but no answers followed. Every part of me wanted to grab my phone, call her, and demand an explanation. But I knew that if I confronted her without more information, it would turn into a screaming match, and we'd end up nowhere. I needed time to process this, time to figure out how to even approach it. When Lisa came home from the park with Sophie later that afternoon, she was smiling like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek and went to the kitchen to prepare lunch, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. Watching her act so normal, so casual, while I was falling apart inside, only fueled my anger. How could she look me in the eye after everything? "Hey, Tom," she said cheerfully, "Sophie had a blast at the park today. She's exhausted." Sophie, now fast asleep in her arms, looked peaceful, completely unaware of the chaos her parents were about to face. "That's great," I muttered, barely able to form words. I avoided eye contact, pretending to be absorbed in my phone, but my mind was miles away. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I kept my distance from Lisa, unsure of how to act. Part of me wanted to pretend I didn't know anything, to just go back to the way things were. But I knew I couldn't. There was no going back from this. That night, after Sophie had gone to bed, Lisa settled on the couch with a glass of wine and her phone. She'd always had this habit of disappearing into her phone after Sophie went to sleep, but now, knowing what I knew, it all felt different. Every message she typed, every time she smiled at the screen, my stomach twisted. I knew who she was talking to, and it wasn't me. I couldn't take it anymore. "Lisa," I said, my voice thick with emotion. She looked up, startled by the tone in my voice. "Yeah? We need to talk." Her face immediately tensed. "About what?" "I know," I said, barely able to get the words out. "I know about James." For a moment, she just stared at me, her face frozen in shock. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The glass of wine trembled in her hand as she set it down on the coffee table. What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice weak, but I could see the guilt in her eyes. "Don't play dumb, Lisa." "I saw the messages," I said, my voice cracking under the weight of betrayal. "I know you've been seeing him. While I've been busting my ass, trying to keep this family together, you've been sneaking around with someone else." Lisa's face went pale, and for a second, I thought she might deny it. But then she let out a shaky breath, and the truth came tumbling out. "It's not what you think, Tom," she said, her voice pleading. It's complicated." "Complicated?" I exploded, standing up from the couch, my fists clenched at my sides. "You're cheating on me while I'm killing myself at work, and you call that complicated?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and she buried her face in her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for it to get this far." "How long?" I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated for a moment, then finally spoke. "A few months. It started after you began working all those extra hours. I felt so alone, Tom. You were never here, and I didn't know how to handle it." My mind was racing. A few months? This had been going on for months, and I hadn't noticed a thing. I was so focused on working, so focused on providing for my family, that I hadn't seen the cracks forming in my own marriage. "I was working for us, Lisa," I said, my voice breaking. "For you and Sophie. Everything I did was for this family." "I know," she sobbed, wiping her tears away. "I know you were, and I'm so sorry. But it felt like you weren't really here anymore. It felt like you cared more about work than us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So, what? You thought cheating was the answer? You thought that sneaking around behind my back would somehow fix things?" She shook her head. "No, I wasn't thinking. It just happened. I was lonely, Tom. And James, he was there. He listened to me. He made me feel like I mattered." I couldn't take it anymore. I turned away from her, pacing the room, my mind spinning. How could she do this to me? To Sophie? To everything we'd built together? "Do you love him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The question felt like a dagger in my chest, but I needed to know. Lisa looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I don't love him. It was just a way to cope. But I don't want to lose you, Tom. I don't want to lose our family." Her words hung in the air, heavy and desperate, but they didn't erase the betrayal. They didn't change the fact that she had broken our marriage, shattered my trust. I didn't know if we could come back from this. I stood there, staring at her, unsure of what to say, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to walk out that door and never look back. But another part of me, probably the part that had fallen in love with her 8 years ago, wanted to believe that we could somehow fix this. That maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what she had destroyed. But I knew it wasn't going to be that simple. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while Lisa slept beside me, her soft breathing filling the silence. How could she sleep so peacefully after everything? How could she lie next to me, knowing the pain she'd caused? I felt like a stranger in my own home, disconnected from everything I thought I knew. The next few days were a blur. I went through the motions, taking care of Sophie, going to work, pretending everything was normal. But inside, I was falling apart. Every time I looked at Lisa, I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. How had we gotten to this point? How had I missed the signs that our marriage was crumbling? I couldn't bring myself to talk to her about it. I didn't know what to say, and I didn't trust myself not to explode again. So, instead, I kept my distance. I spent more time at work, even when I didn't have to, just to avoid being home. But no matter how many hours I put in, I couldn't escape the thoughts that haunted me. One evening, after another long day at the shop, I came home to find Lisa sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for me. She looked tired, more tired than I'd ever seen her. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her once vibrant face was etched with lines of worry and regret. "We need to talk, Tom," she said softly as I walked in. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure if I had it in me to hear more. But part of me knew that we couldn't keep avoiding this. We had to face it, no matter how painful it was. "Okay," I finally said, sitting down across from her. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she folded them on the table. "I know I've hurt you. And I know I've broken something between us that might never be the same. But I want to try to make it right. I don't want to lose you, Tom. I don't want to lose our family." Her words were earnest, but they didn't ease the weight on my chest. How could I ever trust her again? How could I forget what she had done? "I don't know if we can come back from this, Lisa," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You betrayed me. You betrayed us. How do you expect me to just move on?" "I don't expect that," she said quickly. "I know it's not that simple. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. I'll go to therapy, we can go to couples counseling, whatever you need. I'm not giving up on us." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she was truly sorry, that she regretted what she had done. But the wound was still fresh, and I didn't know if I was ready to forgive her. "How do I know you won't do it again?" I asked, my voice quiet but laced with the fear that had been eating at me since I found out. "How do I know that when things get tough again, you won't run back to someone else?" Lisa's eyes filled with tears, and she reached across the table, placing her hand on mine. "Because I've learned my lesson, Tom. I've seen what I almost lost. And I can't bear the thought of living without you, without Sophie. I was selfish, and I was wrong. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust again. Please, just give me a chance." Her touch was warm, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of the connection we once had. But then the memory of her betrayal came rushing back, and I pulled my hand away, unable to let her in just yet. "I don't know if I can," I whispered. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." The room fell into silence, thick with the weight of our broken relationship. Lisa wiped her tears, sniffling quietly as she looked down at her hands. "I understand," she said softly. "I know this won't be easy. But I'm not giving up. I'll fight for us, even if you're not ready yet." Her words lingered in the air as I sat there, torn between anger and love. I still loved her, that much I couldn't deny. But love didn't erase the pain. It didn't make the betrayal disappear. That night, I slept on the couch. I couldn't bear to lie beside her, not yet. Maybe not ever. Over the next few weeks, things between us remained tense. Lisa kept her promise. She found a therapist, started going to sessions on her own, and even scheduled a few couples counseling appointments for us. I went, but I wasn't sure if I believed it would help. How could talking about our problems fix what was broken? Still, I showed up. Maybe because deep down, I wanted to believe there was a chance we could rebuild. Or maybe because I didn't want to walk away from 8 years of marriage without trying everything. Sophie deserved at least that much. But every session was a reminder of how far we'd fallen. The therapist asked questions that forced us to confront the ugliest parts of our relationship, the resentment, the loneliness, the betrayal. Lisa cried through most of it, and I just sat there, numb. It wasn't until one session, about a month into counseling, that something finally shifted. The therapist, a calm woman with a soothing voice, asked me a question I hadn't been able to answer before. "Tom, what do you need from Lisa in order to even consider rebuilding this relationship?" I stared at the floor, my hands clenched in my lap. What did I need? I didn't know. I needed her to take back the affair, to erase the hurt. But that wasn't possible. So what could she do? After a long pause, I finally spoke. "I need to feel like I'm not just convenient. Like I'm not just someone she settled for when things were good, but someone she'll stay with even when things get hard. Lisa, sitting beside me, sniffled and wiped her eyes. "You're not convenient, Tom," she said softly. "You're everything to me. I just lost sight of that." The therapist nodded, her gaze gentle but firm. "Trust is built through consistent actions over time. If you both want to repair this marriage, it's going to take more than words. It's going to take work, patience, and forgiveness. Are you both willing to do that?" I didn't answer right away. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a sliver of hope. Maybe we could come back from this. Maybe Lisa could prove she was still the woman I fell in love with. "I'm willing to try," I said quietly, glancing at Lisa. "But I don't know how long it'll take." Lisa squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with determination. "I'll wait as long as it takes. I won't give up on us." The days turned into weeks, and the initial shock of Lisa's betrayal began to fade, though the pain was still ever present. We continued with therapy, both together and individually, but rebuilding trust wasn't as easy as I had hoped. It felt like every step forward came with 2 steps back. Lisa was trying, really trying, but no matter how hard she worked, I couldn't shake the images of her with someone else. Every time she smiled at her phone or left the house without a detailed explanation, a knot formed in my stomach. Was she still hiding something? Was James really out of the picture? One evening, after another therapy session, I found myself sitting in my car outside our house, unable to go inside. Sophie was at a sleepover, and I knew Lisa was waiting for me, probably preparing dinner like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I felt like I was living with a stranger, someone who had shattered my heart, and now expected me to just pick up the pieces and act like it could be glued back together. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the steering wheel, lost in thought. Was I doing the right thing by staying? Could I ever really forgive her? I didn't know the answer to those questions. All I knew was that, despite everything, I wasn't ready to walk away. Not yet. Maybe it was because of Sophie, or maybe it was because part of me still believed in the love we once had. Either way, I wasn't ready to give up. When I finally walked through the front door, Lisa was sitting at the kitchen table, a bottle of wine open and 2 glasses waiting. She looked up as I entered, her expression cautious, like she didn't know what to expect from me. "Hey," she said softly. "I thought we could talk tonight, if you're up for it." I nodded, sitting down across from her, though my stomach churned with anxiety. Talking was always harder than it seemed. I never knew what to say, and half the time, I didn't even know what I was feeling. Lisa poured the wine, sliding a glass toward me. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said in therapy last week, about needing to feel like you're not just convenient." I took a sip, my eyes on the glass, avoiding her gaze. "Yeah. I don't want you to feel that way," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I know I've hurt you, and I know I've given you every reason to doubt me, but I need you to know that you've always been more than just convenient, Tom. I didn't cheat because I didn't love you. I cheated because I felt lost, and I didn't know how to handle it. That doesn't excuse it. I know that. But it's the truth." Her words hung in the air, heavy with emotion, and I could see the sincerity in her eyes. But sincerity didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't make the hurt go away. "I know you're trying, Lisa," I said, my voice low. "But I don't know how to get past this. Every time I look at you, I think about him. I think about what you did, and it kills me." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she wiped them away quickly. "I don't know how to make you trust me again. I wish I did. But I'm not giving up, Tom. I'll keep trying, every day, for as long as it takes. I'll show you that I'm here, that I'm committed to us. But you have to tell me what you need. I can't do this on my own." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she could change, that we could somehow rebuild what we had. But the fear of being hurt again was like a wall between us, one that I didn't know how to break down. "I need time," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how long, but I need time to figure this out. To figure out if I can ever really forgive you." Lisa nodded, her tears spilling over. "I understand. I'll give you all the time you need. Just, don't shut me out. Please." The raw emotion in her voice tugged at something inside me. Despite everything, I could see how much she regretted what she had done. I could see how desperate she was to fix things, to make amends. And as much as I wanted to stay angry, a part of me couldn't help but soften. Maybe it was because I had loved her for so long. Or maybe it was because I still wanted to believe in us, even after everything that had happened. That night, we talked for hours, about the affair, about where we had gone wrong, and about what we needed to do moving forward. It was the first time in months that I felt like we were really communicating, really opening up to each other. And for the first time since the affair, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. The following weeks were filled with small steps toward healing. Lisa continued going to therapy, and I made an effort to be more present at home. We spent more time together as a family, taking Sophie to the park, having dinner as a family, and trying to create new memories that weren't tainted by the past. It wasn't easy. There were days when the anger would creep back in, and I'd have to fight the urge to lash out, to accuse her of still hiding something. But I was trying. We both were. One night, about 2 months after the initial discovery, Lisa sat me down again. This time, she looked different, more confident, more certain. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice steady but serious. My heart skipped a beat. I could feel the tension in the air, and my mind immediately jumped to the worst-case scenario. Was there more to the story? Had she been lying about something else? "What is it?" I asked, my throat dry. She took a deep breath. I reached out to James. I told him to stay away from me, from us, for good. I blocked him on everything. "I don't want anything to do with him, Tom. I only want you." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me was relieved that she had finally cut ties with the man who had come between us. But another part of me was still guarded, still unsure if I could believe her. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice edged with suspicion. "I was scared," she admitted. "I didn't know how you'd react. I didn't want to make things worse. But I realized that if we're going to move forward, I need to be completely honest with you. No more secrets. No more lies." Her words were heavy with meaning, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could start to rebuild. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight. But if we both put in the work, maybe there was a chance for us. And as I looked into Lisa's eyes, filled with regret and hope, I knew that I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. As the months passed, things between Lisa and me slowly began to change. It wasn't dramatic, and it certainly wasn't easy, but little by little, we started finding our way back to each other. There were still moments of doubt, days when I couldn't shake the images of her betrayal, or nights when I lay awake wondering if I'd made the right decision by staying. But those moments were becoming fewer, and in their place, I found something unexpected: peace. It wasn't the peace of forgetting or pretending like the affair had never happened. That would have been impossible. But it was the peace that came with understanding, with accepting that, as painful as it was, this was now a part of our story. We couldn't change the past, but we could decide how we were going to move forward. Lisa was doing everything she could to show me that she was committed to rebuilding our marriage. She was patient with my anger, understanding when I needed space, and, most importantly, honest. There were no more secrets between us. She'd cut all ties with James, and every time I asked her about their last conversation, she didn't shy away from the truth. One evening, after putting Sophie to bed, we sat together on the couch in the living room. It had been a quiet day, with no fights, no tears, just calm. And as we sat there in the dim light, sipping our wine, I realized something I hadn't been able to admit before: I didn't want to lose her. "I've been thinking a lot about us," I said, breaking the comfortable silence. Lisa looked over at me, her face cautious, waiting. She had heard me start this kind of conversation before, and it hadn't always ended well. "I know I've been distant," I continued, my voice soft. "I know I've struggled with forgiving you. But I also know that I still love you, Lisa. And I think I'm ready to really try to forgive you." Tears welled up in her eyes immediately, but this time, they weren't the tears of regret or guilt I had grown used to. These were tears of relief, of hope. "I know it won't be easy," I said, reaching for her hand. "And I don't expect things to go back to the way they were. But I'm willing to give us a real shot. To put in the work, just like you've been doing." Lisa squeezed my hand tightly, her voice trembling as she whispered, "I love you, Tom. I'm so sorry for everything, but I promise I'll never take you for granted again. I'll spend the rest of my life proving that to you." In that moment, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about erasing the pain or pretending like nothing had happened. It was about choosing to let go of the anger, to stop letting it control me. It was about choosing love over resentment, hope over fear. And as I sat there, holding Lisa's hand, I made that choice. The next few weeks were like learning how to be married all over again. We had to figure out how to communicate better, how to be honest with each other without causing more pain. Therapy helped, but so did just spending time together, going on dates, talking about things other than the affair, and remembering what it felt like to enjoy each other's company. There were still difficult moments, times when I would get lost in my thoughts, wondering if we could really make it. But Lisa was always there, ready to reassure me with her actions, not just her words. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, Sophie ran into the kitchen with a drawing she had made at school. It was a picture of the three of us, holding hands under a bright, shining sun. "This is us," she said proudly, showing off her masterpiece. I smiled, looking down at the crayon drawing. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Lisa knelt down beside Sophie, admiring the picture as well. "You're quite the artist," she said, her voice warm with pride. As I watched them, something inside me shifted. For so long, I had been focused on the pain, on the betrayal, on everything that had gone wrong. But standing there, in that moment, I saw what was right in front of me, the family we had built, the love that still existed between us, even after everything. Later that night, after Sophie was in bed, I found myself sitting on the back porch, looking up at the stars. Lisa came out and sat beside me, her hand resting lightly on my knee. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying the quiet. "I've been thinking a lot too," she said after a while, her voice soft. "Yeah?" I glanced at her, curious about what had been on her mind. "I know that things will never be perfect," she admitted. "I know I hurt you in ways I can't undo. But I want you to know that I'm all in, Tom. No more running, no more excuses. I'm here, for better or for worse." Her words hung in the air between us, and I felt the weight of them, the sincerity, the commitment. For the first time in a long time, I believed her. "I'm all in too," I said quietly, taking her hand in mine. "It's not going to be easy, but I think we can make it." Lisa smiled through her tears, and in that moment, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for so long. It wasn't the peace of forgetting or pretending, but the peace that comes with choosing to forgive and move forward. We had a long road ahead of us, and I knew there would still be challenges to face. But for the first time since I had discovered the affair, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we had a chance. A real chance to rebuild, to heal, and to find our way back to each other. And as we sat there together, holding hands under the stars, I knew that I was ready to take that chance.